Hello and welcome to After the Anime. We are going to explore what happens in the story of Hunter x Hunter after episode 148 of the anime has ended. So if you got to the end of the anime and you want to know what happens next, we're going to go through all of that together in a way that's easy for everybody to understand. And the way that starts is with the Dark Continent Expedition arc, which is super exciting and has some of the best world building I think in the entire series. Now just so you're not surprised, the manga after the anime does not focus on Gon, and mainly because of the events that happened at the end of the anime, it doesn't really make much sense for that, but it does focus on some other characters that we know and love and is still really great. Now I'm going to assume that you watched the whole anime and that's why you're here, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on anything that happened in the anime, but if something new happens or there's new characters, we'll go over that in detail so you understand. So let's go ahead and get started. So we open with a meeting between 10 of the Zodiacs, notably Periston and Jing are missing, and Beans has an important video to show them. This video is kind of a pitch from the Emperor of the Kakin Empire, saying that he's going to take his people to the Dark Continent, and he describes it as a land of bounty and resources, and they're going to go colonize it. Now this description is a little bit at odds with what we've learned from Jing in the last episode of the anime. And Mezaistem also adds that humans don't go there because every time they come back, they're met with a catastrophe, and that the V5, which is the ruling group of nations right now, has all signed a treaty together not to go there. And then there's a little back and forth with the Zodiacs about how the Kakin Empire actually isn't part of the V5, so it doesn't apply to them. But regardless, the Emperor then teases us with who's going to lead this expedition there, and he puts Isaac Netero's picture up there. Rightfully, all of the Zodiacs are shocked, but no, it's not actually him. It's his son, Beyond Netero. And so you think that would be, the joke is that it's not Isaac Netero, but the Zodiacs are still shocked because no one had any idea that Isaac Netero had a son. So Beyond Netero gives this speech, this big grandiose thing about how he will lead everybody into the Dark Continent. It doesn't matter your age, your race, your religion, everybody will be equal when we go. And he tells everybody, gather to the Kakin Empire and I will take you there. So after his speech ends, Bean turns to the Zodiacs and tells them, I actually have 2 DVDs that the chairman left behind. It said that if someone showed up claiming to be my son, to show these videos to all of the Zodiac 12. So the Zodiacs look at each other and say, well, we're not all here. There's only 10 of us here. We're not the Zodiac 12. At which point, Cheadle chimes up and says, well, I actually have something to say about that. But before we hear what she has to say, we actually cut to Beyond Netero in his castle. And he's getting all this information about how the video is going viral. They're getting phone calls off the hook about everybody that wants information on going to the Dark Continent. And he's like, great, let them all in, this is perfect. And he also gets information that the V5 is telling them to cease and desist, just to stop saying that they're going to the Dark Continent. And Beyond Netero says that's not surprising. I mean, what would we even need to do if we actually wanted to go through the V5 to get to the Dark Continent? And one of his little henchmen captains starts listing off all of the forms they'd have to file and everything they'd have to do to go to the Dark Continent. And Beyond gets pissed. He's like, I don't care. Stop telling me about it. And so Beyond explains all of that's in place, all that bureaucracy is there so that even if we apply, they can just basically stall us out and tell us no. And so he addresses all of his captains and he kind of continues his grandiose speech about how I'm going places no one's been before, I won't refuse anyone who comes, and I'll crush anyone who gets in my way. And it pans across all of his captains here, and right at the end, we get a familiar face in Periston. And we also get a shot of Jing outside of the castle, when Cheadle tells us that Periston and Jing have asked to withdraw from the Zodiac 12, and I let them. So, basically, we're the Zodiac 10 now, we're all here so we can watch the videos. But before they do, she also adds that the V5 have actually contacted them and want them to hunt down Beyond Netero. Now after this, we actually move to the V5, specifically to the International Permit Agency, where they give out the permits for people to be able to go to the Dark Continent. And we join a new guy who's talking with the director. The director's talking to him about, what have you learned? What does all this mean? And the new guy says, basically, we don't let anybody go to the New World. That's what all of that's for. So Beyond was right when he said the bureaucracy is just to keep people out. And so now the Kakin Empire's expedition has them worried. And this is where we get the first mention of the Gatekeeper. because the director says that what the gatekeeper of the New World hates most are people who lack manners. So you can't just go to the New World and wash up on the shore. You have to go through this gatekeeper, who's apparently a stickler for manners. And so the new guy asks, well, what would happen if they go? To which the director responds, Pandora's box. To which the new guy responds, Pandora's box? Like, that's a figure of speech, right? Nope. We are then greeted with some pretty grotesque images. And we're told that all of these things used to be human. And there's a little conversation here about bodies that were wrung out like towels, which should ring a bell for you from the anime with Nanika. And then we actually see this hunter who's a Dark Continent survivor. And the wording they use here is really interesting. They say he hasn't eaten human food in 50 years, that he's purely self-sustaining. So it's then stated that every time we go to the Dark Continent, we bring back an extinction level threat. And so these threats are what we're seeing behind all these security doors at the V5. We then cut to Isaac Netero's DVD, and he tells us about his son, Beyond, and how he actually led an expedition to the Dark Continent for the V5 in the past. He insisted on taking unexplored routes, and things went really bad, so Isaac made him promise to wait until Isaac Netero had died before he tried to go again. And now that Isaac Netero is dead, these events are taking place. Now, Isaac Netero's last request is that he asks them to explore the Dark Continent before Beyond Netero gets a chance to, and he puts this mission at a rank A. For reference, the Chimera Ants, which could have exterminated all of humanity, were a rank B. I don't know that there's a rank S, I would presume so, but this is probably the highest rank mission we have seen before. Now, at the end of the video, he states that because of the risks involved, this is not an order. I repeat, this is not an order. And then a third time he says, I repeat, this is not an order. To which the consensus among the Zodiacs is, yep, it's an order. Which is a really interesting interaction and tells you a lot about the relationship between the two. And we get this really cool quip from Cheadle where she's like, since it's an order, we have no other choice. But since he insists it's not an order, we can't get any of the other Hunters Association involved. It's just the Zodiacs. And at this point, Sayu, aka Monkey Man, speaks up and he's like, I don't think we should hunt down Beyond Netero. And it sparks this whole discussion between the Zodiacs where they're like, yeah, Beyond has years and years of preparation on us, and none of us have even considered going to the Dark Continent. And they say, I think only Jing has considered going, and he's not here. And they don't actually even say Jing. They're like, as far as I can think, I only know of one such idiot, which is hilarious. And so while they're going back and forth about whether or not to hunt Beyond Netero, Beans gets a call. And who shows up? But Beyond Netero, right in front of the Zodiacs. And Beyond tells the Zodiacs, call the V5 and say that you've caught Beyond Netero. So Beyond Netero has already thought this through to where he knows that the V5 is going to ask the Zodiacs to go hunt him down, and just shows up at their doorstep and says, tell him you caught me, before he's even told that the V5 has done so. And then right here at the end of the chapter, we get some really cool details about what these calamities, the 5 threats, humanity has brought back from the Dark Continent. We get the botanical weapon, Brionne, which is probably the coolest looking one to me. It says he protects ruins. We get a gaseous life form named I, called the Codependence of Desire. The twin snake, Hellbell, which is a monster that infects prey with a homicidal desire. And then the beast that keeps people as pets, called Pap. It's said to be a trade-off between life and pleasure. And then finally we get Zombie, the immortality disease, which I think is a great play on the word zombie, described as endless pair disguised as hope. And our new guy's reading all this and is like, man, this is a place humanity should not go back to. And there's actually this nice little Easter egg on the next page at the end of the chapter, where we get Nanika saying, I'm from the Dark Continent, AI, which tells us that Nanika, well, obviously is from the Dark Continent, but also that Nanika is one of these gaseous life forms called I, the Codependence of Desire, which is kind of a good description of what Nanika's abilities are. It's not like a super important thing to the rest of the story, but it does help put a lot of what Nanika is in the last couple arcs into context. So in the next chapter, it looks like the Zodiacs have taken Beyond Netero and chained him up in an interrogation room. And the first thing he tells them is that he predicts that he will be released and that the Zodiacs will go to the Dark Continent with him. He talks to Cheadle and he agrees he should be arrested, but that's not how the real world works. And we see Cheadle thinking that in spite of everything, he's here, he's chained up, he's in the interrogation room, but she thinks to herself, we're being attacked right now. Beyond is attacking us. And Beyond says that he's going to give them the truth about the V5's policy regarding going to the Dark Continent. And in the style of these chapters, instead of Beyond telling us himself, we actually cut to the V5. And our new guy is giving a presentation to these V5 officials about the Dark Continent. And this is where we get some more really good concrete information about the Hunter x Hunter world. So he shows us that here's the official world map. But this world map is actually located within a giant lake called Mobius Lake, which is part of the Dark Continent. And according to their data, there's been 149 documented expeditions to the Dark Continent. Of those, only 5 of them came back with 28 people. And of those 28 people, only 3 of them were in a mental state to be able to go back to their daily lives. So we get more cool information about going to the Dark Continent because he tells us that the 5 trips that came back were all done by the V5 with a cooperation from the Guide. And we're told that the Guide is a being who's summoned by the Gatekeeper, which is really interesting because apparently he's cooperating with the V5 somehow. Now the officials are like, we've heard this already, we just want to know how to stop the Kakian Empire from going. To which our new guy tells him, the peaceful way to do this is to invite the Kakian Empire into the V5 to become the V6. Then we make the king a hero for going and exploring and just make him agree to divide all the rewards he brings back into 6ths. Now this is where they do the sneaky part. They say that we're going to have all of those immigrants who are going to go to the New World, they're going to go to one of the uninhabited islands in the neutral zone by the far ocean boundary. So all these immigrants are not actually going to go to the Dark Continent. We're going to drop them off right before we get there and just act like they made it to the Dark Continent. Then Kakin can take their actual voyage to the Dark Continent with carefully screened members, and the Hunters Association will chaperone. And we cut back to Beyond, who's explained all of this to the Zodiacs. Again, he hasn't heard anything from the V5, he just put out that message and knew that each one of these things were going to happen. Then he basically challenges the Hunters Association. He says that the Dark Continent's going to be a proving grounds. It's going to be you guys versus us. Will you accept? And that's when Cheadle thinks, yeah, we're being attacked. The entire association is going to need to fight for this, and she accepts the challenge. To which Beyond Netero is happy to hear, as everything is going according to his plan. Then we actually cut to a news broadcast that's presumably in the Kakian Empire for the voyage to the Dark Continent, and we're shown a whale-like ship that can hold 200,000 people that's going to make this trip. In addition to civilians, it's going to carry Beyond Netero, the king, and 14 princes, which are going to be very important later. The broadcast then gives out a bunch of propaganda for the Dark Continent not really being as scary. They're like, oh, there might be some poisonous snakes and stuff like that. And those calamities from the ancient texts, they're like viruses and microbes, and we have modern medicine. And so we know that all that's not true, but they're trying to get as many people as they can to go on this trip. And right before the chapter ends, we actually get Jing showing up in Beyond's castle, and he confronts Periston. And so he goes up to Periston and is like, hey, I want in on this. Periston is surprised. He's like, oh, I thought you would try to stop me. To which Jing is like, yeah, I kinda am. Because if the Hunters Association didn't do what you want, you would send out 5,000 Chimera Ant soldiers. So you remember all of those Chimera Ants that were created but never used by Meruem? Apparently Periston has all of those and is ready to set them out if he needed to. So Jing says, don't do that. Stop messing with the Hunters Association. Don't mess with them anymore. I'm gonna play with you now. Then we see Jing's Ren come out, and Periston's like, oh, so you're finally gonna play with me? And Jing's like, you? Oh, I might be doing this for my own fun. Which is really exciting because we're going to see a lot more of Jing and Periston. So if that sounds exciting to you too and you want to stick around and see this, be sure to hit subscribe and follow along and we'll go through this together. If you have any questions or comments, suggestions about anything involving this video, I'm more than welcome and open to those because I'll take any advice or help I can get. I'm just trying to do my best out here. So I appreciate you guys. Hope you have a great rest of your day and I'll see you soon. Adios.